Okay, so I left off leaving the drug deal that was happening right next to my car. Sorry, I look kind of gross. Whatever. I'm working um, in my shop, and I've got some stuff glued up, so I thought I'd tell the next segment between glue ups. Um, Left that parking lot in a big time hurry because I didn't want to be a statistic. Um, got Went north towards LA, um, and I believe it's right past LA or maybe into LA. The 101 or Highway 1, which is right there on the coastline, and it's real windy. And I wish I had a sports car driving down it or a motorcycle, but needless to say, I had a big, or at least for the time, a big SUV. Now it's considered a tiny SUV. Um, so drove through LA from San Diego, got on Highway 1, drove for, I don't know, an hour or so, um, and found a little park camp site that seemed really cool. So I pulled over, um, checked in with the a park ranger. I don't know what you would call them, but the people that check you in at the camp. They looked kind of official, like a park ranger. So um, it was really cool because when I got there, the park ranger said, "Does this vehicle have four-wheel drive?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, cool. We've got spots out on the beach. You can go pull your car out there and camp on the beach if you want." And I was like, "That's perfect." So it was just a really cool experience where I literally had the back of my truck with the window and gate open, um, and I laid in the air mattress that night, and I slept with the basically the waves kind of crashing, not all the way up to the edge of my truck, but close enough to where I could hear them great, and it was kind of surreal in a sense. So did a little hiking around there. It was pretty cool. And then the next morning got up, jumped in the truck, drove another whatever amount of miles north on Highway 1, and found another camp spot. I was really kind of in the mood to really hike and explore the wilderness and that sort of stuff, and just avoid city life and bars or any of that sort of stuff. I'm not really a drinker, so it didn't appeal to me back then. And I found another, little RV camp, sort of whatever you want to call it. And I pulled over and I got to the area where you check in, and there was a lady that was like I said, I think she was a park ranger, but I'm not 100%. So she's asked for my ID, the typical, "Can I see your ID?" And I don't remember if it was maybe registration as well for the vehicle, but she walked around the vehicle and it, had a little mirror and looked under things, just to make sure. I don't know what she was looking for, really. But when she came back to the door, she said, "What are you doing all the way out here?" And I said, "Well, I'm taking a break from life in general, and I took 5 weeks off of work and going through a divorce, and I'm, driving across the country just to kind of explore life and find myself and whatever." And she goes, "I did that same thing 10 years ago." And she said she actually came from the same city, from Louisville, Kentucky, and did the same thing. Took time off work, was trying to find herself, and drove across the United States and was stopping here and there. And she said she stopped at the campsite that I was getting ready to check into, and she camped there for 3 nights and fell in love with it so much she called back home, told her roommate that she would rent the house that she owned out to her. She'd come back and get her stuff, but she was moving out west to California. and she ended up getting a job at the ranger station or the campsite where that made her change her mind. And I thought that was really cool. So she was so excited to tell me her story that she said, put your truck in four-wheel drive. I'm sending you to the best spot this campsite has to offer. So sure enough, I did, and I got super excited. And she gave me a little handwritten map, and I drove up through the redwood trees and everything. And the way my car was going so steep uphill, you couldn't see anything over the hood, which was kind of scary and exciting. And what felt like it took me 45 minutes to get to this spot, it finally kind of plateaued out. And there was this big open area, and I parked my truck right next to a redwood tree. And that's where I kind of set up camp. And the redwood tree was bumper to bumper wide as my truck, which I thought was just incredible. And the sights of these redwoods, when you look up, and it's just, they go on forever. They're as big as, giant buildings in New York or Chicago and that sort of stuff. So from there, I camped and hiked and explored, and it was an incredible campsite and place to goof off in. And she was totally right, or at least I totally understood why she up and moved right then and there. So after a day of that, I got back in the truck, and I have some friends that live in San Francisco. So I drove even further north into San Francisco and met up with them, and we explored all of San Francisco because they had been living there for maybe a year or two. So they kind of got a feel of the land and all that sort of stuff. And I was absolutely blown away by San Francisco. There's about 3 cities I've ever been to that I said if I had to pack my bags and move to those cities overnight, I would do it in a heartbeat. San Francisco was one of them. The art, the lifestyle, the different temperatures you could go from back and forth, just exploring everything. But one of the coolest things we did, and I don't know if it's still there, but if it is, it's amazing and you need to go check it out. So we went to the Golden Gate Bridge. Not that that's what you need to check out, but you do need to check that out. Walk across the Golden Gate Bridge. It's cool. However, when you go to the Golden Gate Bridge, and I don't remember which side it's on, but under the bridge, so if the bridge is coming up like this and the land is right here, in this little spot right under the bridge is a pet cemetery. It is amazing. The pet cemetery is, I don't know, it felt about the size of like half a football field. Maybe not quite that big. But there were headstones for pets that were like super elaborate, made out of marble and stone and carved, and like something you would see in a movie. But it was for someone's furry animal, their cat, their dog. There were headstones for parrots and fish. And then there were also the other kind of the low end of headstones where people would basically drive a stick into the ground where they had buried their pet and maybe had a postcard, or not a postcard, but a photo of their pet tied or stapled or whatever to this stick as a monument. But it was, I know that's morbid and whatnot, but it was just fascinating and really cool. From there, we went to a penny arcade, which is somewhere in that vicinity because I felt like we walked to it. And when I say a penny arcade, like old school, you put a penny in, and it was more like instead of playing games, you watched something happen. If you can imagine the old robotic fortune teller type things, but it was that, but all kinds of different horse racing, little metal horses running around tracks when you put a penny in and stuff like that. Really cool, very nostalgic. And then, we went out to eat. It was the first place I'd ever tried Ethiopian food. We also went to visit another friend of mine in what's called the Tenderloin, which that was pretty cool. However, at the time, I don't know if it's still this way. I haven't been there since. When we were walking down the sidewalk, you literally were stepping over top of drug addicts. And a buddy of mine was like, yeah, heroin's really big right now. And so literally people laying on the sidewalks doing their heroin, and you'd step over them, and nobody bothered you, but it was just weird. It was a very surreal kind of moment. And I know there's parts of LA that are like that now. So I stayed with them for probably 3 or 4 days. Another friend of mine called me and said she and a couple others were going to some forest near San Francisco area. And I wish I could remember the name of the forest, but I can't. And they were going to go camp with a trail crew, and asked if I could try to meet them there. And I said, sure. I'm kind of done being in San Francisco, and I'm ready for my next adventure. So I drive to the forest that they told me where it was, and all, or at least I looked on the atlas, I found it. It was not Yosemite, but it was not far from Yosemite either. I just can't remember the name of the forest. So I get there, I check in, I grab my backpack with some water, maybe a couple changes of clothes, that kind of a thing. And maybe like a buck knife, not a buck knife, but like, a utility knife type thing, or a knife. Real simple, easy pack, whatever. And I go to the campground office or whatever, and I said, hey, I'm meeting some buddies, and they're camping with your trail crew, which I didn't even know what a trail crew was at that time. So the person there said, oh, you'll find them on this trail. You're probably going to be hiking for about 3 to 4 hours. I was like, that's great. So I had to take a bus with a whole bunch of families and whatnot up to this main trail type thing. So I get on this bus, and it's a typical bus, and there's probably 25, 30 people on the bus. We drive to the trail. I get out, literally hike for 3-4 hours, and finally come across some people that they don't look like hikers, they don't look like campers, but they're out doing stuff. And so I just kind of approached them. I was like, hey, I'm looking for a trail crew. And they said, oh, we're part of the trail crew. You must be friends with, and named the friend of mine. And I said, yeah, actually, yes, that's who I'm trying to find. So they lead me to their camp, which has a kitchen, it's like a little village. There's probably 10 little, 2-person little tents that you would normally see when you just go camping. But then there was this one giant tent that had stoves and that sort of stuff, where it was literally where they would do all the cooking. And there was a crew of felt like maybe 18 to 22 people, something like that. And their job was they would go live on the trail. If I remember correct, I think they said 4 to 6 months at a time. And all they would do was like clean the trail. And when I mean clean, I don't mean picking up leaves or garbage, although they would do that. But a lot of times giant trees will fall over and cross the trail. So they would cut those to free open the trail. Sometimes rocks would fall or roll in front, so they'd have to blast it with dynamite and that sort of stuff, but they had to make it safe. But it was a cool little crew. So they were giving me the the grand tour of their camp that they set up. And this camp was pretty good size. It was, it was probably 100 yards circle. So they showed me the little tents and where I would be staying in one of the little tents with a couple other people and that sort of stuff. And then they showed me where the bathroom was. And this was where it was really weird. So the bathroom was kind of off away from everything. And they had dug a trench that's probably 2 foot wide. And probably like, it seemed like 4 or 5 foot deep. Something if you fell into it, you'd be up to your, chest or shoulders. So, and the trench was probably 10 foot long, if I were guessing. And they had run 2 logs going the length of the trench, propped up, sitting, 12 to 16 inches above the ground. So they said that's where you go to the restroom. And they had rolls of toilet paper kind of propped up on all these logs and everything. And I was like, all right, that's weird. Cool. Hopefully I won't have to use that. But I have to go to the bathroom like that every morning. So hang out with this trail crew. We have a wonderful time. Cook dinner. They're playing music, that sort of stuff. And we all go to sleep. The next morning, get up, and they've made breakfast, and we have coffee, and it hits me, I've got to go, kind of thing. Like, I'm kind of like clockwork. It's time to do my bathroom business. So I'm not a real, like, public person like that. So I hike over to where the restroom is. And as I turn the corner around the bushes, there's 3 people sitting on those logs doing their business. And it's a guy and 2 girls. And they're sitting not quite shoulder to shoulder, but right next to each other. And they're talking. And they're not even like, one person's facing one way, one person's facing the other. So they really don't even have to turn their heads to talk. It was weird. It was super weird. I realized that's what they have to do that. So I was like, okay, you know what? I can suck this up, and I'll try next, tomorrow or later today, that kind of thing. So I went back later that day. Still, people were in the restroom, and I was not about to sit down next to them and do my business. So another day goes by, and then finally a third day. And every time I tried to go to the restroom, no luck whatsoever, because it was always full. Not full, but there's at least, even if it was just one person, I didn't feel comfortable doing my stuff. So I wrapped up my little camping with the friend of mine and headed back to catch the bus. And I was probably couple hours away from camp hiking, and it hit me hard. I mean, like a brick. I had to go. So I got off the trail and hiked up into the woods away from everyone, or at least from anybody that might be hiking the trail, and leaned up against this tree and did my business. And not to get very descriptive, but it was definitely like 3 days backed up. So it took quite a bit to cover because I buried everything I could. However, before I buried, as I'm finishing up, I realized I don't have anything to wipe. So while I'm sitting there, I pull my knife out and I cut the sleeves off my shirt that I'm wearing. And I used my shirt sleeves as toilet paper. Which worked great. I felt great. I felt a lot lighter. Hiked the rest of the way back. Got to the, the bus stop to catch the bus back to my truck. And as soon as the bus got there and opened the doors, I get on the bus and I turn and I look. And it is nothing but like families with young children, and they're looking at me because I'm completely filthy. I haven't had a shower in 3 days. I've been like goofing off in dirt and stuff, as well as my shirt sleeves have just been cut off. So I've got this dirt / farmer's tan happening. I'm an absolute wreck. And in my head, all I can think is like, if you guys only knew why my shirt sleeve was missing. But everybody on that bus was looking at me like I was an absolute, like a crazy person that just came out of the forest. So that's my fun adventure for this video, is hiking and not being able to use the restroom with people, sort of thing. I don't know if that's entertaining or not, but it is what it is. It's part of my story. So like, subscribe, share, do whatever you want to do. I'm not worried. I just want you to, listen. I feel like I got some funny stuff to say. So I will talk to you on the next video. Bye.